So I think there's a whole wealth of things that have grown excitement around the audio sector in the last few years. I think it's the most exciting place to work in media currently.
I'm delighted today to be joined by Simon Kilby, Managing Director of Bauer Media Advertising, to chat about all things audio. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening in the audio space, the ongoing rise of digital listening, commercial radios taking over the BBC, radar showing changing listening behaviours from working from home. And so we're going to dive right into a lot of different things. So thanks so much for joining me, Simon.
My pleasure, Ella. Nice to see you.
Yeah, let's see. So I think in the year ahead, I remember you were saying that the audio market is really growing, and radio podcasts are kind of healthy, vital parts of that. What would you say have been the biggest changes or innovations that you've seen in audio over the last year? And what does that mean for advertisers?
Yeah, so I think that I think it helps to put that into context over a wider period than a year, because I've worked in what started as radio and has become audio, quite rightly, I think, sort of 11 years ago. And at that time, I think that radio was viewed pretty much kind of still as the box in the corner of the kitchen, or you listen to it in the car. And it always seemed to be the first platform that was under threat on media schedules. And there was always something that was going to kill radio. And you fast forward now to the point where audio is a thriving, growing, mobile, digital, always on media that can be really excited about the future. And I think everyone who works in it is really excited about the future. To me, that change and evolution hasn't happened by accident. That's kind of been deliberate strategy from ourselves, and in fairness, global as well. And that's been driven for me by a few things: the creation of real genuine national brands. So whether it's Absolute Radio, Heart, Capital, Magic, etc., that kind of investment in those brands, and then the distribution of those brands also. So whether that's DAB or IP, that kind of digital evolution has allowed us to develop brand extensions and grow and build and develop those brands. And then there's the investment in content as well. And you've seen that really, I think, in the last year, and actually the last couple of years, with lots of talent coming over from the BBC to join commercial radio. So whether that was, whether that's Andrew Marr on LBC, or whether that's Simon Mayo, or our very recent announcement of Ken Bruce leaving the BBC after 30 odd years to come over to work on Greatest Hits. So I think that has been a massive evolution in it as well. I think the final thing that's really, really supercharging the audio sector is the growth in IP listening. And I think if you looked at the last radar, certainly of Bauer's total estate, 29%, so just under 30% of all our listening is on an IP connected device. And that is really changing the game, because what that's giving audio is kind of that broadcast scale, but also that one-to-one connection. And that one-to-one connection that we have is allowing us, for us with our joint venture with News, Octave, allowing us to offer more targeted advertising solutions. Also, there's that growth in the podcast sector as well that you mentioned, that's really allowing us to extend our content into new areas, and again, deliver more targeted and impactful creative solutions for advertising.
And I think it's interesting that you said that it was in the past maybe the first thing to be kind of taken off of a media plan. Why was that, do you think?
I think it's a perception, wasn't it, that radio was a bit old world, and if you go back, it was TV that first was going to kill it, and then it was other digital platforms. So the difference in radio's evolution to a digital future compared to, say, newspapers or magazines, it's just happened later because of the technology, and you've seen growth of things like smart speakers that have really accelerated that. So there's been a whole mood shift, I think, from how agencies and clients see audio in the last 10 years.
I think the digital aspect's really interesting. And a lot of people might not know that Bauer's got that higher share of digital listening. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, it might be about 75%. And Absolute Radio Network recently went fully digital in January this year. I wonder if with that, if there is like an inflection point, if there's a risk of being overexposed as digital media kind of cuts, like have had a tough start to the year and advertisers cutting spend on digital, do you think that might happen to radio?
I don't think so. No, and I think if you look at Absolute, it's a great example because that's always had the reputation as something of a digital pioneer. So it was one of the first to launch an IP product in the UK back in 2012 when I joined. But I think Absolute going fully digital was just a natural extension for that brand. It was just, the AM listening was ultimately a really low proportion of the overall listening. Actually, cutting off the AM transmission is more environmentally friendly because it requires more transmitters to produce the output. So that was just a natural move for us to make. I think that that total 75% of digital listening, which we do have and is industry leading, you have to break that down, and 30% of our listening is IP and a lot of the rest is DAB, and they kind of offer different things. So that rise in DAB has allowed us to acquire more distribution to provide those brand extensions. And then I think IP is definitely kind of the next real horizon for us, and we don't see anything other than that digital listening growing. And I think that there is an opportunity for us in that increase in IP. Whereas if you look at things like newspapers, which is an industry that I used to work in, that shift, as you correctly say, I think was slightly challenging for newspapers in terms of that shift to digital. Because ultimately in newspapers, people were paying for the content and then paying a high CPT for the advertising. No one's ever paid for the content in radio. So that move to IP just allows us to increase opportunity to listen and then offer more targeted solutions to advertisers. So I see it as only an opportunity and upside for us.
And I think especially with as you say, the IP and being able to listen on the move and that kind of changing listening behaviours. And obviously the pandemic may have had an impact with remote working or flexible working. Do you think that with that, is there a shift in what peak actually means in terms of listening?
Yeah, it was. And I think this is to the great credit of Radar, actually, is that obviously when we first went into the pandemic, you did see real shifts in listening. So an increase in listening at home, that peak slightly moving away from breakfast because people weren't, on the school run or commuting in the same way. I think since in the last 12 months, you've seen it start to move back, but not fully. So I think that there are fundamental changes. And I think, again, the one thing the pandemic definitely did was accelerate the rise of smart speaker listening, which again is a huge opportunity. I think it's nearly 20% of our total listening now comes via a smart speaker. So that's a really interesting area for us. And it allows us really to think differently and creatively about how we utilize that. So as an example, our Magic Breakfast sponsor is On the Beach, and we launched, as part of their sponsorship, we launched smart speaker competition with them recently. So to answer questions via your smart speaker and enter in a unique competition for people listening on smart speakers who ultimately could win them a holiday. So I think it's just another example, actually, about that shift is opening up new opportunities to engage with our listeners, but also opportunities for our advertisers to engage in a slightly different way.
And what would you say, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the audio advertising industry, what would it be and why, just to finish off?
Yeah, so I think that as I see it, audio is the most exciting place to work in media at the moment. And of all the things that are going on and all that development in the audio sector, if I could wave a magic wand, I would get agencies and clients to really fully appreciate the value of audio and give it a much bigger percentage of their overall media budgets, because in my view, it absolutely deserves it.